Hello, HMS modelers. In this webinar, recorded March 25th, 2025, Jay Pack from the HEC-HMS team is joined by LA District Engineers Jose Paredes and Jackie Oler to present a new method for post-wildfire modeling in HEC-HMS with the Green-Ampt Loss Method. And they're also going to show how it compares to the SES curve number method. Enjoy and happy modeling. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for the second quarter HMS webinar. Just a second, I'm going to turn it over to our presenters. We have Jay Pack, Jose Paredes, and Jackie Oler. Jay Pack is our post-fire debris and sediment expert here on the HEC-HMS team. And we are super honored to have with us Jose and Jackie, who are two Los Angeles district engineers putting these HMS methods for modeling post-fire conditions into practice. They got a chance to model some of the recent wildfires that impacted the Los Angeles area. So we're super pleased that they were able to hop on and join us today and show us some of the work they've been doing. We're going to talk about the new method for post-fire modeling in HMS, as well as I said, like a very timely case study for putting these different methods to use. So we're excited about that. We will have time dedicated to discussion and questions at the end. A reminder to everyone, this webinar is being recorded and the video will be posted to our website soon. So in the interest of keeping disruptions at a minimum, we're going to keep everyone on mute, but please type in your questions in the chat as we go. Hopefully we'll get a chance to answer some of them as we're going along in the presentations. And then at the end, we'll try to circle back to any we didn't get to. If we don't get them answered within the allotted time today, we'll get to them eventually and we can always reach out and email you back. So with that, housekeeping out of the way, I am going to turn it over to Jay to kick us off.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. Okay, my name is Jay Pack. So today we're gonna talk about some post-wildfire hydrology. So even we have some debris flow function in HMS, but today we're just talking about the post-wildfire hydrology. Okay, so through the let me use that. And control. Through the presentation, I'm gonna talk about some fire impact on debris basin or downstream reservoir structure. And then what is the motivation about this study and then this feature in HMS, okay? And then I'm gonna talk about some specific and new post-wildfire loss method using Green-Ampt equation, okay? So before, we just have one option for post-wildfire hydrology. That's the carbon number approach. Now we have two options, carbon number approach and the Green-Ampt equation approach, okay? And then based on that Green-Ampt equation, we need to develop some guideline, how we can use that for post-wildfire situation. So based on that, I need to develop new guideline. I'm using Euler Gulch rainfall simulator data to generate the new guideline for post-wildfire hydrology. After that, I validated with the Aeroseco case study. Okay, now we have a great opportunity to use some new fire modeling based on the recent LA fire. Okay, so through that kind of a fire case study, I'm working closely with the LA district, Jose and Jackie. Today, Jose gonna present some SCS carbon number approach using HEC-HMS. And then Jackie present about the Green-Ampt approach, especially with the wetting front suction option in HEC-HMS. Okay, that's our overview through our presentation. Okay, we need to think about first, what is the fire impact on our watershed, on our structure like a reservoir and debris basin? Everybody know with the current some weather situation, we have more warm temperature. When based on that, we have early snow melting and then longer dry season. And then also we have some different wildfire pattern compared with before. We have a more extreme wildfire. Based on that, we have some soil kind of water repellency after fire. And then also storm pattern is changing also too. Now, based on some historic rainfall data, we have a more extreme short duration, high intensity rainfall. That's the key. This is energy to generate some kind of runoff under the fire situation. Also is going to be source of energy to generate the debris yield. Okay, the manage with the situation, we have a more fresh flood and then more faster, more kind of higher peak in terms of a volume, in terms of a peak. And then we have a more sediment debris, and then it's a downstream kind of a structure like a debris basin or a reservoir, we're going to lose some capacity. That's the current issue with this fire situation. Okay, so this is just some previous study from the NRCS. You can see left-hand side is unburned kind of hydrograph situation from the 4 different watershed. Right-hand side is a fire situation under the burn scar. You can see easily peak flow is easily up to 3 to 4 times. Okay, that's the same rainfall, but under the fire situation, your runoff is going to be increased up to kind of this much. Okay, this is just study motivation. Okay, I can share this kind of USDA hydrology technical note number 4. This is a great guideline for post-wildfire hydrology, especially using curve number approach. But inside this report, they mention curve number is pretty heavily depend on the hydrologic judgment of a practitioner, because curve number is not the physically based. Okay, so now we need to think about that. Okay, we need some different approach. Okay, so normally under the fire conditions, especially kind of mountain watershed, we don't have any data, especially no gauge data. Sometimes we have rainfall gauge, but it's not gauge, it's high elevation. So with that situation, qualitative approach is another good kind of a methodology compared with number and then any additional approach. That's why we're trying to develop the additional alternative solution. We're using Green-Ampt. Okay, Green-Ampt, everybody know, is like a physically based model. I will explain about this. Okay. I lost my cursor.
It's there, Jay. It may just be. Is it on annotate right now?
Okay. How can I? Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. This one is a traditional curve number approach. So inside, it's USDA technical note number 4. They provide some quick and simple approach for using curve number. You can see here, this is a Higgins method. You can generate some unbound condition with curve number. For post-wildfire situation, you just adding pre-fire curve number plus 15, 10, 5 for different burn severity. Okay. They provide another method we call Livingstone method. It's pretty much simple, but they're using this graph instead of a table. But the same approach is just to add curve number based on the different burn severity. That's the traditional way. We can use this one for curve number approach in HEC-HMS. Next one, we're trying to develop some Green-Ampt method. This one is original Green-Ampt approach. It's kind of equation. But we utilize some Phillips equation. Phillips equation, we can replace hydraulic conductivity and then suction head, soil moisture, replace with the subsivity value. Subsivity value is kind of a new concept in terms of a loss method. So with this, we can change this original Green-Ampt method with this based on the subsivity value. Okay, subsivity value is a function of contact angle. You can see when you drop the water in the soil surface, if you have something kind of a hydrophobic layer, your contact angle is bigger than 90. Okay, and then if you use something absorbed to the soil, maybe your angle, contact angle, is going to be reduced like that. Based on that, if you have an 88 high angle, you accumulated this infiltration rate lower than lower angle because of lower infiltration rate. That's the concept to use some subsivity value in terms of a Green-Ampt approach. Now, you can choose the inside the HEC-HMS Green-Ampt method. You have two options, subsivity value option and then wetting front option. With this, we need some guideline like this covenant approach, how we can generate some similar approach for post-wildfire hydrology based on the pre-fire calibrated model. That's the we're trying to prepare. Okay, to do that, we're using Walla Gulch Rainfall Simulator. I just downloaded there's a whole data set. This is a published one by USGS. You can see 2x4 small rainfall simulator. They generate the rainfall and then they captured for flow. But they installed this one is a different location. It's a burn area, unburn area. Okay. After 1 year after fire, 2 years after fire, 3 years, 5 years, something like that. This location is just southeast of Tucson area. I'm using that. This is a kind of a 20 case rainfall simulator about our range. And then I calibrated this 20 case and then kind of make some plot. You can see moisture deficit. This is one of the main input parameter for Green-Ampt. You can see unburn, 0 burn. This is first year burn, second year, fourth year, fifth year, something like that. This is a subsivity value. This is a conductivity. This is the main value for Green-Ampt. You can see some trend. Now I want to concentrate just the first year after fire. Okay. With this, I got some idea. Then I apply the total data, is the total 84 event, and then calibrate it in terms of there's rainfall and flow data. And then I plot it into the box plot here. You can see here some outlier. This outlier is kind of dry condition outlier. And then this one is pretty much wet. And then I exclude the dry period data just using wet period or wet data set only to generate the something guideline curve. Okay, using that, this is only wet condition as a moisture deficit. You can see is this unburn is the first year, second, third, fifth year. I want to just using this first year or moisture deficit. I just kept, got the data 0.12 from here or minimum. And then medium is 0.07 here. And then the maximum 0.001. I just got this number from this box plot for soil moisture. Next one is just subsivity. This is a multiplier. Multiplier mean is pre-fire to the kind of first year post-wildfire multiplier. It's the same thing. This is a first year. I got this one is 0.94 from here. Medium is 0.91 here. And then medium is maximum 0.74. Same approach. Using this Phillips equation, I can generate a subsivity multiplier and wetting front multiplier. We can generate two of them. And then final one is hydraulic conductivity. Same approach. I'm just using this box plot based on my calibration of all of data set from the rainfall simulator. and then I generate the hydraulic conductivity multiplier like that. Using this, we can generate it post-wildfire, okay? Question in here, how can use this? Now, I'm trying to wetting front suction option. As a bit more fire, I'm kind of waiting and holding because we are working with the CHL, especially the Dr. Ross Shalito. She kind of preparing the better application guideline of using subsidy multiplier. But you can use this one, but we're gonna generate the better approach, better guideline in the later, okay? But now, I'm just trying to wetting front suction option in here, okay? So we have some published data. Normally, we use this one even for unbound situation. This is a Ross and Brackensick table. Based on the soil texture, they generated some kind of hydraulic conductivity wetting front suction. Another source, pretty similar, this is Arizona DOT. Based on the texture, they generated some conductivity suction and the moisture information. We can utilize this table based on the SOGO, eSOGO data on your actual water project area. And then we can multiply this one. I will showing step by step, okay? This is a case study, Aeroseco. This is Aeroseco watershed. It's a burn around 2009 by station fire, 95% burn. Burn is about moderate 42%, high burn is 36%, low 18%. I'm using this one for case study, okay? Estimate the Green-Ampt parameter, pre-fire situation, okay? This one is I'm using this time, Arizona DOT one, and then we download the SOGO data, multiplied, using this guideline, and then we can generate each sub-basin of Aeroseco based on this texture, based on this value. We can basin average weighted average basin value for KSAT, suction, and then moisture. Okay, this is pre-fire initial. After that, we want to calibrate for pre-fire. This is we picked the 2000 January event, and then calibrate like that, and then we updated, calibrated this value from the previous initial input parameter. Our national script efficiency 0.96. You can see pre-match well with measured data. This is pre-fire calibrated data. Based on that, we just using this guideline table. This is pre-fire. For minimum for post-wildfire, we just using this guideline. Minimum is the moisture, just using 0.12. This is a value. And then suction head, you just the suction using this equation, 0.94 square pre-fire moisture, and then post-wildfire moisture square, and then we got this suction. And then this hydraulic conductivity multiplied 1.91, you can get this hydraulic conductivity for post-wildfire. This is a minimum, and then we generate the medium with this, and then maximum, we can have this. And then 3 set of input parameter, we can run 3 with HMS for post-wildfire situation. Then you can see this is a minimum simulation result, this is a medium, this is a maximum. We can provide some envelope for post-wildfire. So now you can see some measured one. As a measured one is between max and medium. Okay, I can explain this one. You can see here burn severity is kind of moderate 42%, high 36%. That means based on that, maybe we can assume it's a little bit between the high and moderate based on that information. One of the big limitation for this, USGS Waller Gulch rainfall simulator data. At that time, it specified the burn severity. They just specified the burn and that's why we cannot with this based on the different burn severity. At this moment, right, just burn and unburn, we can provide this kind of envelope, minimum, maximum, medium value. And then I compare with the traditional way, our curve number approach. This time we picked the two, Higgins and Livingstone, and then compare with our Green-Ampt approach. I overlap here, and then two result from the curve number. This the highest one is Livingstone one. Livingstone is way over estimated, but Higgins one is a pretty close measure. The mean is pretty close inside our maximum and medium. Okay, most of the case we don't have a measure data, but now we have two options. Is a curve number approach and then this Green-Ampt approach. You can have some better idea and then better guideline for post-fire condition, even without the measure data, without the calibration for post-wildfire situation. This is one of them, okay? But this is still ongoing. We need to develop more. I said before, this is just wet condition. Dry condition, we need more data set. Then we can generate some guideline like this for dry condition. But dry condition is very sensitive in terms of soil moisture. That's the mean is we need more data. Now I mentioned also we don't have kind of information for rainfall simulator with a different burn severity. If we have this one, then with the better. Then I concentrate just the first year, but with more data, we can generate the second, third, fifth year for the more future kind of estimation for in terms of debris, in terms of post-wildfire flow. Okay, now Jose and Jackie, they're gonna present some real application with the Bailey debris basin around the Los Angeles Eaton Fire area. Okay, I'm gonna turn over to Jose first.
Thanks, Jay. I think you can see my screen now. Let's see. Okay, so before we continue with the Green-Ampt case study, I think it's worth discussing the NRCS curve number method. So as Jay mentioned, the curve number method, it's probably one of the most widely used methods in post-wildfire application. So you have states, counties, cities, and even other federal partners. They widely use the method, especially in post-wildfire application. But they also use it on a daily basis. So it's important to kind of really understand the method because essentially that's kind of the language they're speaking, and it's important to kind of understand each other when we're kind of analyzing our analysis. So on the slide here, you'll see the governing equations for the Green-Ampt method. So you'll see them here in the red box. So essentially what it's saying is if you have an initial abstraction, or probably most of you are more familiar with initial losses, if the initial abstraction is greater than the precipitation, then you're going to have zero flow. I think that kind of makes sense to all of us. When the precipitation exceeds that initial abstraction level or initial losses, that's when you're going to start seeing runoff. And when that occurs, this equation here governs. So it's a relatively simple equation. So you have the term, precipitation minus initial abstraction. And then you have this term here, which is the potential maximum retention. So that value, the potential maximum retention, is related to the curve number from this equation here in the blue box. So the curve number has no physical property, meaning you can go out there and actually measure the curve number out in the field. But you can estimate it using land use, land cover data, and hydrologic soil group. For the transform method, you'll use this equation here, provided by NRCS. So you're going to compute the lag time. So that's calculated using, like I said, this equation here. It does have some watershed characteristics. So you're going to need the longest flow path, the mean basin slope. And one of the things that I'll keep mentioning, it is inversely proportional to the curve number. So let's talk about initial abstraction. So the reason initial abstraction actually gets its own slide, it actually gets 2 slides in this presentation. It's because it's the most sensitive parameter. It does play a major role in how much runoff volume you get, especially in smaller, more frequent events. And essentially, that's the realm we're operating in. And post-wildfire hazard assessment, we're basically trying to forecast the next storm event. The next storm event, which is most likely going to be a 2-5-year precipitation event rather than that 100-year event. So because of that, your initial losses, initial abstraction become extremely important. So the initial abstraction is the amount of rainfall that falls before runoff even begins. So you can see that here visually. So let's say you get 5 inches of precipitation and you set your initial abstraction value to 1 inch, like I have here. HMS will subtract the first inch in your hyetograph, and you won't see any runoff until that 1 inch threshold is exceeded. However, the initial abstraction value, initial abstraction is highly variable. It can range from watershed to watershed and even from one event to the other. But if you look at the actual equation from NRCS, you will see that from the equation. They actually recommend you using 20% of this potential maximum protection. So the standard way to kind of compute that is you multiply your potential maximum rotation by 20%. Some folks, several researchers have investigated whether this 20% initial abstraction ratio is appropriate or not, and they found that for many watersheds in the United States, the 20% is not appropriate. You have regions in the U.S. where soils are wetter than average, so it makes more sense to lower that value to something lower. Or here in the LA district, where we operate in the Southwest, we have extremely dry conditions where the watershed retention is greater. So it may make more sense to increase that value. Again, I guess what I'm trying to emphasize here is this is going to be your most sensitive parameter. It's going to vary from storm to storm and from watershed to watershed. And it's really, we really use it as a calibration parameter. So this is how you're going to enter stuff into HMS. The curve number, like I mentioned before, is going to be estimated using land use, land cover data, and hydrologic soil groups. So there's guidance on how to do that. I think there's guidance on the HEC website, so I won't go into details on how to actually compute the curve number. Your initial abstraction is estimated using the equation on the screen. So once you actually break out this S value, you get this. It is inversely proportional to the initial abstraction, the curve number is. And then this lag time is estimated using this equation here. Again, you're going to compute your longest slope path, your mean basin slope. You can get that from the tools in HMS. And again, your curve number is inversely proportional to the lag method. So I keep emphasizing that because it becomes important in the next slide here. So before adjusting your curve number or any parameters to post-fire conditions, we do recommend that you calibrate your model to pre-fire conditions, similar to what Jay said with the Green-Ampt method. And having only having 2 knobs to turn really helps expediting the whole process. When we're performing these analyses, it's in a very, very short time period. Usually you have your EM chief, you have the district and division commanders, headquarters sponsors, all waiting for an answer. So anything that helps to kind of expedite things really helps kind of answer those questions that they have. So if you look at the governing equations, there's really only 2 values that you're going to adjust, like I mentioned before. So you're going to adjust your initial abstraction ratio and the curve number. The curve number, like I mentioned before, it's inversely proportional to the lag method. So as you increase your curve number, either because you're calibrating or because you're going to increase it due to post-wildfire conditions, it's going to result in more runoff. That means your lag time is going to decrease, which is kind of what you would expect out in the field. If you guys are familiar with the peak, like when you peak a hydrograph during a PMF, this is very similar to what you're doing, right? You're decreasing your lag time, which is going to increase your hydrograph. So you do that by just essentially adjusting two parameters when you're calibrating, which really does help speed things up when you're under the bullet. So instead of adjusting 4 to 5 different parameters in different methods, such as initial and constant, initial deficit, or other methods that we're used to here at core, here you're only focusing on 2. So once you actually calibrate the model, how do you adjust those parameters for post-wildfire conditions? And that's really going to depend on where you are in the country, where the actual fire occurred. Jay mentioned 2 different methods. He mentioned the Livingston method, which was specifically developed for New Mexico. And then here in the LA district, we had a pretty good success at using the Higginson method with some modifications. The method uses soil burn severity map, those data sets are typically developed by the BEAR team or the WERT team. This is an example of what that looks like. This is publicly available data that anyone can access immediately after a storm whenever the teams develop it. So to classify the burn area, usually they classify the burn area as either low burn, moderate burn, or high burn, like Jay just mentioned. So what the Higginson method does, it increases your curve number based on burn severity. So it'll increase your pre-fire curve number by 5 if it's a low burn, 10 if it's a moderate burn, and 15 if it's a high burn. The modification that we've done here at the LA district is like I mentioned before, we started adjusting that initial abstraction ratio based on your antecedent conditions. So if we know that conditions are dry, here in Southern California, we have periods where we can go 8 months without any rain. We know it's dry, so we can feel comfortable increasing that initial abstraction ratio up higher because we know conditions are dry. If we know we're in the middle of the flood season, we know conditions are wet, we can lower that value, or if we think it's average, we can leave it at 0.2. So let's look at the case study. Like Jay mentioned, we've been working for the last, I want to say 2 to 3 months, both at Eaton and Palisades Fire. We're modeling both. We've been applying both the Green-Ampt and curve number method to both fires. But today we'll just focus on the Eaton Fire to kind of keep things simple. So this specific project has been a collaborative effort with multiple agencies working together. You have multiple folks from the LA district, HEC, so Jay has been providing a lot of help and support. You have the Albuquerque district who's DQCing a lot of the models and all the products that we're producing. And we also have some folks from DWR and they provided 2 different engineers to help us develop these models. So it's really a big team effort to get these going. So we didn't start the models from scratch. So we use existing HMS models developed for swims and modified them for the study. So on the left here, you'll see the existing LACTA swims model. I highlighted the subbasins that were impacted by the Eaton Fire. The impacted subbasins were modified so they can be used for post-wildfire assessment. So the subbasins were redelineated. So you'll see how they were redelineated here in the purple. So essentially, we had to delineate at each debris basin. So each point that you see here on the screen is a debris basin that's operated by the County of LA. So we put a computation point there, delineated the watershed behind it. And then we also changed the loss and transform method to either the SCS curve number or the Green-Ampt method. So if you take a closer look and just kind of zooming into the area of interest, today we'll, like Jay mentioned, we'll be focusing on Bailey Canyon, mostly because the California Geological Survey installed equipment. There's a camera in this debris basin where they were able to capture a high water mark. So we're using that high water mark to kind of validate our models to see and see how well they're performing. So as I mentioned before, the first step you have to do is you have to calibrate your model. So unfortunately for this a burn scar, none of the streams or debris basins had any gauges. The nearest gauge is actually here near Whittier Narrows on the Rio Hondo. We just felt this gauge was way too far downstream to do any calibration. So what we ended up doing is we looked at other nearby watersheds. So we looked at Arroyo Seco, which is located just to the northwest of the burn scar. And then we also looked at Roberts Canyon, which burned in 2020. So these were previous studies. What we found is that by reducing the initial curve number by an average of 20%, it fit observed data relatively well, as you can see here. So what we ended up doing is we ended up reducing our initial curve numbers for the burn scar by 20% or a ratio of 0.8 to get what we called our pre-fire model. So kind of here's an example, just kind of going step by step. So like I said, what we typically do is we develop a curve number grid based on an LCD data set and GSurgo. Again, there's guidance out there on how to do this on HEC's website. So the next step is then we compute the area weighted curve number for each subbasin. So for the initial curve number for this Bailey Canyon, we ended up computing 85 for the subbasin. We then applied that 20% reduction to obtain what we call the pre-fire curve number. And this resulted in a pre-fire curve number of 68, as you can see from the screen here. So then what you do is you take your burn severity map and adjust your pre-fire curve number to post-fire conditions. So what we do is we take the burn severity map, it's typically a raster. We create a grid based on the Higginson method. So each pixel that you see here has either a value of 0, 5, 10, or 15, depending on the burn severity. We then compute the subbasin area weighted average adjustment. So for Bailey Canyon, it was mostly moderately burned. As you can see, it's mostly yellow with a few patches of low burn. So when you do an area weighted average adjustment, it comes up to be 9.5. So then we take our pre-fire curve number, which if you recall, we computed it at a 68. We didn't increase that curve number by 9.5. We get a curve number of 77.5. So that would be our post-wildfire curve number. And for this specific event, we've essentially been in a drought for the last few months here in California, so we assumed it was dry conditions. So we did increase our initial abstraction value from 0.2 to 0.3, and this is kind of what we're getting as our results. So you'll see the peak inflows shown in blue, peak outflow shown in red. And then we were comparing the peak water surface elevation to the high water mark, and our model performed relatively well. It hit it right on the dot. So we're really happy at how this performed. Obviously, it's just a high water mark. It's not an entire hydrograph, so we're not sure how the volumes compare, but this is pretty good for doing this in about 3 months. So I'll hand it over to Jackie, and she'll talk about the Green-Ampt method.
Thanks, Jose. So so now I'm going to talk about how we applied the Green-Ampt method to calculate the post-fire discharge and water surface elevation for the Bailey debris basin. So the Green-Ampt method requires inputs for the parameters shown on the screen. The first is the initial storage, which represents the antecedent conditions, and it describes how saturated the soil layer is at the start of an event. And there are two initial storage methods available in HMS, and the inputs for those parameters are in volume ratios. So the first option is the initial content, which requires an input for the initial content and the saturated content. And then the second, which is what we use for this model, is the initial deficit. And so that's the difference between the saturated content and the initial content. The next parameter input is for the capillarity parameter. And so there's also two options for this, which Jay talked a little bit about earlier. So the first option, which we use for this model, is the wetting front section. And so this parameter describes the average section forces across the wetting front, which is the boundary between the saturated and the unsaturated zones during infiltration. And then the second option is the sorptivity, and this is the soil's capacity to absorb and transmit water through its pores. Okay, and then third, we have the saturated hydraulic conductivity. And this parameter is the rate that surface water enters the soil column when it's completely saturated. And then lastly, we have the impervious percentage, and this is the percentage of directly connected impervious area in the subbasin. Bailey subbasin is undeveloped, so the imperviousness was set to 0. All right, next slide. Okay, so soil data is needed to calculate some of these initial Green-Ampt parameters. And so in this case, I downloaded surface texture data from the NRCS's web soil survey. And so the figure on the screen shows the soil texture data for Bailey subbasin. And as you can see, loam is the dominant surface texture, but there's also a little bit of sandy loam, very gravelly loam, and gravelly loam within the subbasin. All right, next slide. Okay, so as Jay mentioned earlier, there are a few tables that contain values for the Green-Ampt parameters based on soil texture. And so for this model, the soil texture table that was used to calculate the initial parameters is from the Arizona Department of Transportation's Highway Drainage Design Manual. And so also, since there were more than one soil texture within the subbasin, an area weighted average was calculated for each parameter. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so now I'm going to talk about the pre-fire calibration. So ideally, we would have observed data that we could calibrate the model to, but as Jose mentioned earlier, we didn't have any data for calibrating the Bailey subbasin to pre-fire conditions. So in order to calibrate the pre-fire Green-Ampt model, we used a similar approach as we did for the pre-fire curve number calibration. And so Jay had previously calibrated a model for the Arroyo Seco watershed, which is shown on the screen, using the Green-Ampt Loss Method. And so from this calibration, we were able to create a ratio between the initial parameters, which were computed directly from the soil table, and the final pre-fire calibrated parameters. And so this ratio was then applied to the Bailey subbasin initial parameters to get our, what we call the calibrated pre-fire parameters, which you can see on the screen. Okay, next slide, please. All right, and so empirical equations were developed to convert these pre-fire Green-Ampt parameters to post-fire parameters, which Jay had discussed earlier. And so for this analysis, post-fire models were developed for the minimum, median, and maximum scenarios. The first row contains the values for the post-fire moisture deficit or initial deficit. And so the initial deficit was set to the value that's shown in the table. So for example, the minimum scenario would have an initial deficit of 0.12. The second row contains the equation for the post-fire wetting front section multiplier. And so as you can see, the multiplier is a function of the pre-fire and post-fire moisture deficit. And so once that multiplier is computed, the pre-fire section parameter would then be multiplied by that factor to obtain the post-fire section parameter. And then lastly, the last row contains the hydraulic conductivity multiplier. And so the pre-fire hydraulic conductivity was multiplied by the value in the table to get the post-fire hydraulic conductivity. So for example, for the minimum scenario, the pre-fire hydraulic conductivity was multiplied by 1.91 to get that post-fire hydraulic conductivity. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so this table shows the post-fire parameters for Bailey Subbasin. I would say one thing to note is that the post-fire multipliers and values from the table on the previous slide only apply to the burned area of the subbasin. So for Bailey, nearly the entire watershed was burned, 99.5%. But for subbasins that are only partially burned, the overall post-fire parameter that you would use would be computed by taking a weighted average of the pre-fire values for the unburned area and then the post-fire values computed in the table of the burned area. And then also another thing to note is that HMS has a maximum section parameter of 157 inches. So in some cases, the maximum scenario can produce a value that is larger than 157 inches, such as it was in this case. And in that case, you would just use 157 for that parameter. All right, can you go to the next slide? Okay, yeah, and I think Jay touched on this a little bit earlier, but unlike the curve number method, which adjusts the post-fire values based on burn severity, the Green-Ampt post-fire multipliers and values do not incorporate that parameter. And so that is one of the limitations of this Green-Ampt post-fire method, and it's also one of the reasons why we run a minimum, median, and maximum scenario. However, we do tend to expect that areas with high burn severities to be closer to the maximum and areas with lower burn severity to be closer to the minimum. And so this subbasin is mostly moderately burned, so we would expect the results to be somewhere in the middle. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so now we can go over the results of this post-fire model. And so, as Jose mentioned earlier, we did have a high water mark for the February 13th event. So we were able to calibrate to this post-fire event. And so the current slide shows the minimum scenario, which had a peak water surface elevation of 1,145 feet. And that ended up being about 7 feet below the high water mark. Can you go to the next slide? So this slide shows the median scenario, and this one has a peak water surface elevation of 1,151 feet, which ended up only being about 1 foot below the high water mark, which is pretty good. And then can you go to the next slide? And then this slide shows the maximum scenario, which had a peak water surface elevation of 1,158 feet, and that ended up being about 6 feet above the high water mark. And then can you go to the final slide? And so this slide just shows the water surface elevations of the 3 post-fire Green-Ampt scenarios with the post-fire curve number scenario. And so from the graph, you can see that the median Green-Ampt scenario is pretty close to the curve number scenario, which matches the high water mark pretty well. And so in this case, we had a high watermark that we were able to calibrate to, but in a lot of cases, there isn't observed data. And so running multiple simulations with different post-fire modeling techniques helps us validate our results and give us more confidence in our model. And I think the final slide is just for questions. So, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Big thanks to the presenters. Also, I wanted to give Jay a chance if you wanted to thank any of the partners that you have here.
Yep. First time is funding is that we got a huge research funding from the CHL, and then also we have extra funding from the headquarters, GI funding, and then HEC provided some funding for innovation funding for this research, especially for Waller Gulch rainfall simulator thing. So I'm appreciate about that supporting. And then a lot of people from the CHL, Dr. Ross, and then DRI, Dr. Marcus, and then our HEC, David Ho, Jose, Musa, Jackie from the Los Angeles district, and then Jonathan from the Albuquerque district. I got a huge kind of feedback when I developed this approach. And then finally, we have some kind of good result. Thank you.
So, thanks, Jay. Okay, so it looks like we've got some questions in the chat. I'll just kind of start going through them. So the first one, this one came in early in the presentation. Do we know if the 3 to 4 times flow increase would also be seen in larger storm events, or does it taper off to maybe 2 times, etc.? I think that's talking about like the pre versus post. Although feel free to clarify in the chat if not.
I think what we've seen is if you were to plot a frequency curve with pre and post fire, eventually you start converging at some point. We don't know, maybe 100, 500 year event. Eventually you just get so much precipitation that the hydrophobic doesn't matter. You're just gonna get runoff. But at one point, yeah, like I think it's bigger at like a smaller event, 2 year, 500 event. And as you get larger events, similar to, I think eventually it's going to converge together. At what point, we don't know. So.
Okay. Next question is, how were the peak water surface elevations computed?
So I guess, what do you mean?
I think they probably mean, so the observed was the high water mark, but maybe they mean like how were those modeled within how is the model giving you those peak water surface elevations? I think, feel free to clarify in the chat for us. But maybe how HMS is modeling those was.
This time, I think it's Jose, if I wrong, it's please correct me. This time we're using reservoir element to design for small debris basin. And then we also adding intake tower. We have some intake tower inside the debris basin to screen out some sediment and then just discharge it through the water only. We added that simulation, and then we have HEC-HMS. We have a dynamic kind of a reservoir volume reduction based on the sediment or debris inflow to the debris basin. We have a dynamically updated elevation area, elevation storage curve based on the sediment deposition. With that, HMS provides some water surface inside of a reservoir element. We got that one to compare to this. Over.
Great. Next question. Burn does having like a burn surface does make a significant change in porosity. Why should suction head be significantly higher?
I'm not quite understand about that question. So burn severity, we don't have, especially for Green-Ampt approach. They provided burn and unburn, and then they generate the rainfall simulator and then capture the discharge from the burn situation. But we don't have a clear that's the high burn or normally medium burn and lower burn. But I'm not trying to change anything I'm trying to keep some original data set and then changing value through the calibration process. That's what I got for suction based on the calibration. But it's hard to explain with the different burn severity because each 80 small 2x6 study in an area, I don't have a burn severity. But sometimes low burn, sometimes medium burn, I don't know. But I just trying to use some data set from the USGS journal paper and then trying to use that. So maybe I cannot explain properly because I don't have a detailed background in terms of a burn severity or burn of each 2x6 kind of rainfall simulator area.
Thanks, Jay. Next question. Does the time of concentration for the basins change, as in a faster watershed response post-fire?
So the answer is yes. I think so. For the curve number method, it's being handled with the curve number. So as you increase the curve number, your lag should decrease based on that equation, right? The curve number is inversely proportional to the lag time. But for the Green-Ampt, I think that's one of the limitations right now. And maybe kind of Jay can discuss that, but I think there's a way for us to adjust the time of concentration or your storage coefficient. That right, Jay?
Yes, time of concentration, especially for Green-Ampt method. Right now, we had the mud clock transform method, but I'm trying to kind of provide some guideline for adjusting time of concentration for post-fire situation. But we don't have enough data. We're trying to accumulate the more data, and then we can generate a certain regression equation to guide some post-wildfire situation. Most of the time, kind of area is the mountain watershed, pretty much a small watershed, and then pretty steep. And then that case, the pre and post is not time of concentration is not that big difference because with the steep and small watershed is not that sensitive. That's what I found. But we trying to get the more data and then provide some guideline for adjust time of concentration for fire conditions, especially for mud clock, transform method. That's our plan. Thank you. Over.
Next question. Have you been running these various methods using forecast data over the last few months, rather than observed?
So yes. So I think we've only had 3 different events since the fire occurred. Most of them were relatively small. But yeah, we've been pulling in forecast data sets, which come in a 6-hour time step to see how the models will perform. A lot of that happened early on when we didn't know how well our models were performing. Obviously, like you're getting the data after the storm. So we're like a little hesitant to kind of release that information. But yeah, we have used forecasted data. I think that's the plan. The long-term plan is to turn this over to the county where they can run forecasts and determine if their debris basins are going to overtop or not, or they can prioritize debris basins to clean out prior to a storm. So I think that's kind of the long-term goal. Over.
Thanks, Jose. How do you all approach areas of controlled burns? Are those negligent?
Can you one more time?
I think they're asking how are you accounting for areas of controlled burns, or do you kind of ignore those areas? versus wildfires?
I'm not quite understand about the control burn mean is from this question. Can you a little bit explain a little bit clearly for that portion of a question?
I guess maybe I can try to answer. So we've never done a controlled burn. So everything's been wildfire, right? So this is something that happened either man-made or naturally, and it just went, out of control. So I don't think we've ever modeled a controlled burn scenario. Not if that answers your question.
Maybe I can add some. We have some research group, under CHL, kind of post-wildfire R&D team. They trying to model fire model that during the fire, they can simulate the fire moving. So then we can kind of using that information for kind of real-time kind of a flood model. That's the plan. But this time we just using kind of a Bayer team final fire map. And then we just do simulation. It's another kind of real-time based on the moving fire. That's the more kind of research kind of topic with that situation. But we discussed it during the R&D meeting, but we didn't try that thing for this LA fire project. Over.
Okay, thank you so much. I know there are a couple more questions in the chat. If we didn't get to your question or you have a question that you didn't get a chance to ask, please feel free to reach out. You all have my emails since I sent it, and I can get it to the right person to get your question answered. But with that, to not take too much more of anyone's time, I want to thank everyone for attending, and I want to give a big thanks to Jay, Jackie, and Jose for presenting their work. And just a reminder that this video recording for the webinar is going to be posted on our website, along with all of our webinars our quarterly webinars that we do. So we will be keeping you all updated if you're on the email list about upcoming webinars as well as any future releases. So with that, big thanks to everyone and have a great rest of your day.